you all enjoyed that. We are going to start the recording. You probably just saw the pop-up that says the recording has started, so we'll make sure this is published and available through our Slack channel, which Roshni has shared the link in the chat. My name is Crystal Baker. I'm one of your hosts for today, playing greeter. I work at Indiana University. I'm joined here by Roshni Gohil. She's from MIT, and Jess Stahl, who is from the NCCUA acronym accreditation agency for the Northwestern United States. Did I say that right, Jess?
It's the Northwest Commission for Colleges and Universities. So close.
Yeah, or close. So we're your hosts today. We've got a packed agenda, so I'll go ahead and show you the next slide. If you can advance me, please, Roshni. Today's meeting is brought to you by the letter O, which stands for October, because it's Halloween right around the corner. And of course, our special guest speakers are from OSU. We have Jon Boeckenstedt from Oregon State, and we have Jeffrey Line from Ohio State University Medical Center. And then, of course, OMG, we are so excited about the Tableau Conference. We're going to talk about that at the end of our meeting. So we're just going to move right along. If you have any questions, if you want to talk Halloween, we will be monitoring the chat here in Zoom. So please feel free to use that liberally. And if we have links to share, we'll make sure that we post those in chat as well. Moving right along to a couple of announcements. You may have recently seen these in Slack if you're monitoring that workspace. Dan Smiley, who is our Tableau VP for higher education, has posted a call out looking for panelists for a webinar on December 2nd. If you're interested in speaking, kind of sharing some stories about higher ed experience, please reach out to him. His contact information is in the Slack channel. And again, if you have any other kind of professional development opportunities like that, that would be good for our community. Encourage you to either use the channel open positions, use the general chat, share those opportunities with one another, because after all, that's why we're here. And I did share, I think, in the chat that we had over 400 people registered for this event today. So we're going to try to time box and kind of keep things moving right along to be sensitive to y'all's afternoons as well. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jess, and she's going to introduce Jon.
Okay, it's time for monthly Meet a Community Member Spotlight. Today's spotlight is on Jon Boeckenstedt from Oregon State University. Though, according to his Twitter, he doesn't like talking, he's graciously agreed to talk to us. So the way this is going to work is that we have a list of questions. I'm just going to ask them, Jon's going to answer them until we run out of time. So I'll start with, tell us a little about yourself, describe your role in your team.
Hi, everybody. I'm thrilled and happy to be here. My name is Jon Boeckenstedt. The easy way to remember it is don't think of Beethoven, think of Bach instead, although there are factions within our family that disagree about how to actually pronounce it. And that's a long story I can tell you sometime over a beer. I'm a Vice Provost of Enrollment Management at Oregon State University. Prior to that, I spent about 17 years at DePaul University in Chicago. I've also worked at St. Bonaventure, Grinnell College, University of Dallas, and Mount Mercy College, because I obviously have trouble holding a job for very long. Enrollment management at Oregon State is very much like it is at other institutions. It's included from time to time the registrar, admissions, financial aid, scholarships, enrollment management technology, pre-college programs, the Gear Up program, and other sorts of fun and interesting things that you would typically expect to be here. So I've been at Oregon State for a little over 2 years. I arrived in July of 2019. Was in the office about 8 months and then have been remote mostly since that time. I'm still kind of remote because the pandemic means my new office furniture couldn't arrive. And so I'm sitting in a brand new office right now at a spare desk, hoping that my furniture arrives sometime next week.
So how long have you been using Tableau, and how did you learn Tableau?
I started using Tableau about 2005, I think. I think it was version 3.6. And I was one of the 150 people at the very first Tableau user conference in 2007. I think it was, in Seattle. It was held at the Edgewater Hotel. There were 3 sessions that ran at each time slot, and there were 3 of us from higher education, 2 of whom were from Cornell University. So in those days, it really wasn't something that was very common to higher education, but I had a very specific use case one day and just said, there's got to be an easier way to do this than updating, I think, 65 PowerPoint charts every single term. There's got to be a dynamic way to just use one big data source and then update them automatically when you add the data. And interestingly enough, Tableau was about 6 pages down in my Google search, but I found it and tried other data visualization tools and just kind of fell in love with it instantly.
So what is your favorite Tableau feature?
I don't know that I have a favorite feature. I'm trying to get better at parameters. My background is I was an English major and I have a master's degree in marketing. And so I really am not a coder by any stretch of the imagination. And when I work with calculated variables, it takes me a long time sometimes, as I know it does other people too, but even the simple ones throw me some time. So parameters are something that I've really been interested in. And one of the things I like to do is give viewers the option to change the color scheme. And so, you might color a data set by region, or you might color it by, Carnegie classification, or you might color it by public-private. And I found that little spotlight, that little opportunity to give people the ability to look at data in the way they want to do it is really helpful and valuable.
So what is your favorite Tableau project that you've worked on?
Well, I think there are a couple. I do some personal work on the blog, and I think you see the link in the slide that you included there. There are really 2 that stand out for me. One is I did just from a spreadsheet of digestive education statistics data, the increase in educational attainment in the United States since 1940. And the thing that I really like about that is I was completely convinced that the data were wrong the first time I visualized it. In 1940, something like 4% of adults had a bachelor's degree in the United States. And you watch that trend all the way up until about 2018, where it grows to something like 33 or 34%. And you're just astonished. My parents were adults in 1940. They were born in 1916 and 17, and they were among the majority of people, adults in the country, who had an 8th grade education or less. And so it spoke to me personally, as that's the symbolic power of what a college education can do for you. But it also spoke to me a lot about how America's investment in education post World War II not only improved the lives of so many people, but also happened at the same time that the economy was taking off and igniting and helping a lot of people in the nation. The second one was another blog post I did privately, which was on freshman migration. And as I mentioned, I have a lot of trouble with calculated variables, but on that one, I just sat down and I think I was on Andy Kriebel's blog searching and trying to figure out how to write this calculated variable. It's really not very complicated, but I did it. And so I'll always remember that was sort of my breakthrough one with some calculated variables that I'd done. And I think the topic of freshman migration is a really fascinating one. And then for work, I probably shouldn't be the person doing this, but we really don't have any Tableau people in enrollment management yet. One was to show the progress of registrations as you get toward the start of the term, because people would look at our number of students registered 6 weeks before the start of class. It will be 27,000. And they think we have an enrollment crisis because they're expecting 33,000. And so what I did was create a dashboard that updates every morning and shows our progress year to date. So even though we're headed toward 33, 3 years ago in the state, we were at 26,000. Now we're at 27,000. We're a lot better off. So it's really brought people closer, I think, to the understanding of how we look at and think about enrollment here.
Thanks, John. You shared actually a really neat tip and trick there, actually, in your answer to that question. We're going to move now into the lightning round, which is the Halloween edition. So I'll start with this question: Salem, Oregon, or Salem, Massachusetts?
Oh, Salem, Oregon, obviously.
Vampires or werewolves?
Vampires.
Addams Family or the Munsters?
Oh, one of the greatest episodes of all time was when Herman Munster started playing baseball for the Dodgers. So it has to be the Munsters.
Okay, trick or treat?
Well, if you looked at my waistline, you would say treat. Although my wife wouldn't. She would prefer a trick, but I love caramels, so sue me.
Okay, pumpkin pie charts or apple cider donut charts?
I think the pie chart is much maligned, sometimes appropriately, but I would say pie charts rather than donut charts.
All right, for the more advanced, candy bar charts or lollipop charts?
Until Tableau makes lollipop charts that you can do with one click, I'll stick with bar charts.
Okay, and how about, are you team floating or team tiled?
I would say I'm team tiled just because I'm not a great designer and need to see things where they are in all formats. And
Zombies
Steve,
or mummies?
yeah, I see a comment. I don't think pie charts are evil. I think they're misused. Sometimes they're actually very helpful and very good. So I think the knock on pie charts is exaggerated.
All right, the last question: zombies or mummies?
Mummies, I think. Zombies freak me out.
Thanks, John, for being in our community member spotlight.
My pleasure. Happy to do it, and go Tableau.
So our plan is to have one of these spotlights at every meeting. If you're interested in chatting with us, or if you know someone in the community who we should spotlight, please reach out to any of the co-leads on Slack.
So John mentioned some candy bars earlier. We're gonna look at some candy data for our really quick, less than 2 minutes tip or trick. Ginny Munch, one of our other co-leads, she introduced me to this new box in the middle of the advanced or the table layout dialog, this default number format dialog. So I just want to share what it does and how it works. Let's see if I can get screen shared properly. So I saw this on the Twitters. A friend of mine sent this to me on the Twitters, and I think it's awesome, but we're not actually going to talk about sets or Boolean operators. We are going to talk about candy. So 538 had this candy power ranking back in, I want to say 2018, where they looked at a bunch of different candies and put them, side by side, almost like a March Madness type bracket. I guess it would be an October something or another bracket. And they also looked at all of these different characteristics of candy. Is it chocolate? Is it fruity? Is it caramel, etc.? And just try to see what was going to win. Reese's Pieces were the winner. But one of the cool things is you can actually download the data, and we'll throw that information in the chat right now. Thanks, Crystal. So I just downloaded the CSV and brought it right into Tableau and put it into, I just double clicked measure names, and magically everything just showed up in this page. So the thing about all of these columns like bar and caramel, they're all Booleans. It's either 1 or 0, and they're set as whole numbers. But when you add them to a chart like this and it starts summing things, all of a sudden you have all of these decimals. And it's like, what the heck, Tableau? Why would you add decimals to something that is adding nothing but whole numbers? So a quick way to fix that, you can always go to the individual number format defaults for each each item in the data pane, we can also fix it at the table or at the table level. And to do that, you go to table layout and table options, and there's this option to change the default number format. So by default, it was showing 2. Once I click apply here, you'll notice that almost all of those numbers, everything except for the percentages, went from being decimals to whole numbers again. So that's our really quick tip and trick, candy and Halloween style, because, you know, October. So next up.
Yeah, thank you, Roshni. And if folks have kind of questions, or again, we put the link to download the data set to play around with that. We're happy to share resources too in the chat. So moving on, I'd like you to meet Jeff Line. Jeff is from the Ohio State University Medical Center. He is born in Columbus, Ohio, and has worked for 28 years as an IT professional, data engineer and Tableau administrator at Ohio State. Some fun facts about Jeff is that he's got 2 daughters who are now out of college. He's married to his sweetheart for 27 years, and he was a member of the Ohio State University marching band. Not currently a member, but he's probably out there in that field somewhere with the T-Rex eating a Reese cup. Of course, Reese is his favorite candy. We had to ask that question. And yeah, that being said, we're going to learn a little bit about the use of Python to be able to use percentiles with one of the vizzes that Jeff is going to demonstrate for us. And that being said, Jeff, I'll let you take it away, and you can start screen sharing whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Let me get my, yep. Share. Okay, can you guys see my presentation, I hope? Okay.
Looks great.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about percentiles with Python. This is my quick agenda introduction. I've already been graciously introduced, but I left that slide in there for other purposes. I'll talk about the patient satisfaction background, our business case, a very quick and non-technical, easy setup guide that you can use or not use, and then putting it all together, then I'll leave some time for Q&A. So I originally gave this talk back, I don't know, 4 years ago to the Columbus Tug, and I had an introduction slide, and I would talk about all the things that I did. So since it was Halloween theme, I decided to scrape the interweb to find some pictures of myself dressed in Halloween costumes. So just so you know who's talking to you, he's willing to dress up for Halloween. So patient satisfaction background. So it's really the hospital consumer assessment of healthcare providers and systems. Let me take a deep breath. That's a lot to say. That's formally, you can also call it HCAHPS. So what is that? It's a standardized survey instrument and data collection for measuring patients' perspective on hospital care. Core set of questions that can be combined with a broader customized set of hospital-specific questions. 3 main goals of this is objective and meaningful comparison between hospitals, public reporting to create incentives for hospitals to improve care, increase transparency of quality of hospital care. And currently there's 21 patient perspectives on care and patient ratings identified in 9 key topics. So that's the patient satisfaction. So from an OSU perspective, how is that handled? So 100% of all inpatients are eligible, not that everyone is going to get a survey. Well, we randomly sample patients. They get mailed or emailed surveys. They fill them out, send them back. They're collected and processed by Press Ganey. And in all, there's about 80 plus questions. And if you get something that looks like that, that's what your survey is, little Likert score. So why is this important to hospitals? Well, we utilize this knowledge that we get back so we can create action plans to improve our performance in areas that are lacking. So basically, we're trying to improve our care so it makes your stay at the hospital better. Lastly, it empowers you to make informed decisions. This is on the web. I think it's the HCAHPS site. You can compare hospitals, by star ratings on different slices. And this is basically what the survey boils down to. So you can compare hospitals, doctors, so that you can make an informed decision on where you want your care. So my title talked about percentiles. And so what that is the medical center wants to compare itself against its peers. So we use percentiling to do that. So currently there's probably over 4,000 hospitals that participate in this survey. So all the data is collected. So we can compare ourselves against all our peers. And obviously we want to be in the top percentile so we can say we're the best hospital in Ohio, the nation, or whatever. Plus it also allows us to identify areas for improvement as well too. Our patient satisfaction reporting requirements. So we want to be able to provide new filters, groupings, service lines, units, providers. We could get down to managers, doctors, whatever. Percentile calculations, there are metric roll-ups, metric groupings. We wanted to include current and historical reporting needs. As far as our data concerns, well, the percentile benchmarks comes in a different data source than what our survey data comes into. So obviously the question is, why don't we just join the data and make it look nice and pretty? Well, at the time I did this presentation, which was 3 to 4 years ago, we had 23 million responses from our survey questions. We have 360,000 percentile benchmarks. Each question has 99 possible results because it's a percentile 1 to 99. Nobody ever gets 100%. A question can belong to many roll-ups. A question can belong to many groups. And so you get a big scary monster of data. Oh, and the last thing, the data has to be aggregated first before you can actually figure out the percentile. So the solution that we're using a Python external service. So if you're not aware, Tableau has extended itself to be able to pass expressions to an external service for processing. So if you're creating a calculation and you happen to see these are the 4 calculations that you can do to pass to an external service. So what does that mean? So we're sitting in Tableau Server or Tableau Desktop, and we have a calculation. It's going to send some data to the service. It's going to process it, and then it's going to spit it back to your Tableau so you can visualize it or aggregate it or sort or filter on it. So that's what the service allows you to do. So this is my quick start setup guide. It's very quick and hopefully you'll understand. So the first thing you're going to need an external service server. So currently you can use R, which came out in version 8.1. So you're going to need an R serve deployed. Python came out in version 10.1. So you're going to need Python and the newest version of TabPy. You can use MATLAB, which came out in version 10.4. So you need a MATLAB server. So the server allows you to deploy functions that you can process and spit it back. A couple friendly tips: install, configure, test, and repeat. I think I did this multiple times to get the process down and steady enough to deploy to our servers. Know your environment. Some of the unknowns, if you install something locally, it's not on your PC, it's not the same as when you install it on a server. So you may need to talk to some server architecture folks. Allow your service to capture errors for debugging and any issues that happen to arrive. Step 2, libraries. So install any collection of functions, algorithms, or models. Python, R, and MATLAB all have these available. It provides access to system I/O, gives solution to many problems that occur in everyday programming, will make your coding life so much easier. With TabPy, it comes with 4 pre-deployed functions. So you have those 4 listed: principal, component analysis, sentiment analysis, t-test analysis of variance, or the short name ANOVA. So once you have that deployed, now you need to connect your desktop so that you can start utilizing it. It's very simple. When you're in Tableau Desktop, you just click on the help screen, settings and performance, and then manage external service connection. And then you get a nice little window that says, okay, what's the server, port, username, password. You can test the connection and click OK. And at that point, if the connection is there, you're connected to the service. And then you can start sending code to the service to process. Friendly tips. This may have changed, but I believe you're only allowed one service per workbook. And just a friendly tip, just use an alias instead of the server name in case you ever move the server and change the server name. Lastly is server configuration. So this is, you'll need a server admin to do this. It just so happens that I am. So it was very easy for me to do. So when you log on to the server, there's some extensions that you need to enable. There happens to be one right here. It says allow analytics extensions. You click the button there, and then you can create your connection. And it's as simple as you click what connection that you want. It'll prompt you with the same screen as pretty much what was in the desktop. You put in the server name, you put in the port, you put in the user ID and passwords, and click OK, and then you're good to go. Some security concerns to think about. The code does execute on the server. So if you're thinking of maybe somebody deploys some malicious code, it does execute on a server. But we're all professionals and everybody signs something that they're not going to do harm to your company. Authentication to the service. You can either have authentication where somebody has to supply a username or password, or it can be open. Then lastly, who can actually publish stuff to the service? Some code examples. So there's really two ways to do this. One is you write the code directly in line in your calculation for Tableau Desktop. So this is an example. I'm using the script int function, and that is some Python code that I grabbed off the internet to do a few things. The other way is once you deploy a function, you can call that function, which this would be your function right here. You pass it in your parameters, and then you get a response back, and it does the same thing. This is more portable because now other people can use it, and this won't be embedded in a workbook. So with that, I'm going to go over to a demo. So let me get out of this. Quick thumbs up. Can you guys see my Tableau server? I hope so. So I am on, okay, thank you very much. So I'm currently on my development Tableau server. So going through the steps, the first thing is you obviously need to deploy the service. So I deployed a Python server, so it's running. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that it's actually running correctly. So this workbook is very simple. I actually use the Superstore data. So, whoops. So over here, I'm looking at the salesperson. It is running this code right here that basically changes the case from upper to lower. And then my other one over here is actually taking the sales and timesing it by 2. So now I know that my service is up and running. So now I can maybe develop a function that I can use to call. So the next slide, this is the function that I was using to pull back the percentiles because we need to pass in certain parameters. It makes a call to an external database. It pulls back the result, sends it to Tableau, and then it gets rendered. So this is the deployment process that I use to deploy it. Now, once it's deployed, you kind of get a nice little message from the command line that it did deploy. You can use Postman. I found this online. I think I put the link at the end of my presentation to verify. You can actually query your service to see all the functions that are deployed. I only have one deployed right now, which is this psat_function. So once that function is deployed, then I went along and said, okay, I need to verify that it works. So this is really more of the guts of this solution. So this table right here represents the percentiling from 1 through 99 for a certain roll-up and metric. It happens to be national roll-up and the HCAHPS overall. And then there's a range from low to high. So what the service does, it takes in these 4 parameters, it passes it to that Python function. It then queries a database and pulls back the result set. So this is the actual code rendering of this. This is just using the table directly. And I was using this for verification to make sure that this was actually working. So if I change this to 75.4, so now I get 72 down here. I scroll down here, this is against the database directly, not using the service. So there is some rounding issue. I think my function is not working right. So shame on me, I deployed an incorrect function. So if you're looking at the code, this is the script that was in Tableau desktop. So I'm passing in the percentile, the metric, the roll-up, and the year. And then it gets the response back. So how does this look in a real world example? So this dashboard doesn't function because the service it was using prior is no longer working. So I did take a screenshot of it. So this was deployed originally. It's still on our service. The service does not work. The stars indicate the percentiles for the various areas. Now, what's good about this is it's still taking in 4 parameters, but it is allowing the end user multiple ways to slice and dice the data and still render a percentile for that group. So let me go back to my slides. So the next steps that I'm going to do, obviously I got to fix that function because it wasn't working because 1 decimal place was out of place. Like I said, this was currently deployed in development. We're going to move the code to production. We're going to look at automated function deployments so we don't have to manually deploy those. And then monitoring, we're going to make sure that the service is alive, because the bad thing about this is you don't want the user to hit your dashboard and then get a big error message saying that the service is down so that they can't render the visualization. And then one of the things that I just thought of today, well, we want to measure how often the service is being used, how fast it's being used, and so forth and so on. So these are a lot of the resources that I use to help me develop all this stuff. I'll be sure to send the slide deck so people can utilize this. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions if we have any.
We do. So we have just a statement from one. I'm going to butcher your name. So I'm sorry, but Shruyan, I think, mentioned that in starting in 2021.2, there's an option to have multiple extensions in the workbook, so you can have R and Tab Pi scripts. So Jake asked, are the extensions workbook specific? And then what happens when you publish to your local server?
So that's a great question. So the the service is actually can be consumed by many things. So what you're doing on the server is you're allowing a pointer to your, whether it's R or Python or MATLAB. So it allows the connection to go to that service. Whatever you have deployed on there, that's what you can consume in any workbook. So the service connection just allows you to connect to it. So hopefully that answers your question.
I've got a follow-up question then for you. So
Sure.
are these, are the pointers, they're site specific, right? Or are they, can you set them up at the server level?
Yes. So they are site specific. So sorry. Yes, you can enable and disable different services on different sites. So, right, I was running, currently I have multiple sites, but this service is only running on one of our sites. I could
And-
put it on another site and configure it there if they wanted to connect to it as well.
So you can use the same service across multiple sites as long as you have site admin access to all of those sites or know someone who does.
Correct. Or no, yeah, or know your best friend who's a site
Exactly.
admin. So.
But at the server level, is there a way to configure, and you may not know this, I don't know how the OSU server is configured, but is there an option at the server level to say, you know, these pointers are going to be on all sites that we create by default?
I think originally before they just recently made a change to allow you to have more connections on the server, which is better because, and it's actually in a GUI interface instead of writing command line stuff to configure it. I don't believe there is a way to do it.
Well, we just got
Actually,
an update.
while I'm talking about it, I'm actually looking it up while I'm on that server.
So in the chat, it looks like Tableau is in the process of setting up connections on the server level, and they're planning to release that in an upcoming release. So,
yes.
so soon.
So you can enable analytics extensions on your all sites. You need to configure the actual connection on the site itself. That it looks like the way it is set up right now, at least
Right.
the version that I'm using.
Exactly. So one of the other questions that came up from Vlad is about the infrastructure. So do you keep your Python server running all the time? Is it on a separate machine or server than your Tableau server, or is it on the same machine?
That's a great question. So our setup is we have we run Tableau Server on one node and we have a disaster recovery node, which in essence, they're mirror images of themselves. So currently since the DR node is not utilized until there is a DR, we've decided to deploy our service on that server because it was a beefy enough server to handle. It's probably a little overkill for what we're trying to do. As far as the service being up all the time, I think I have it set to start itself maybe around 2 a.m. and then shut it down at 11 at night, just because we have backups and there's a lot of backgrounders running between 11 and 2 a.m. So I didn't want to have any extra overhead happening at that time. So.
Cool. If so, are you a site admin or a server admin for your instance?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I am the server admin.
Okay.
So
if people who are site admins on your server need help with this, like what is your process in case we have some server admins on the call who sort of like are trying to figure out how to make this something that they don't have to babysit, but that they can enable the site admins to do more with. Do you have any tips or tricks on that end, or like advice to make that be more successful?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that, and only because we have minimal sites and.
Sorry.
No, I would probably say I think we would be okay having the site admins configuring their connection to, obviously you want to have a centralized service, so you don't want each site to have their own service because that kind of defeats the purpose. So you can have one R or one Python service, they can deploy their own code on the same service. They just need to enable that connection on their site. So that's how I would do it. Utilize the same server for R or Python or MATLAB. They could create their own connection on their sites as long as it's referencing maybe a unified server that they can deploy stuff to. So,
Right.
but that also
So-
goes down to who can actually deploy stuff, which that's kind of what we're looking into, because right now I'm the only person that can deploy stuff. Obviously, we only have one function, but if we want to roll this out at scale, we're going to have to come up with a way that we can allow other developers to deploy code to the services so that they can then consume.
So how long has it taken you guys to get to where you are now, and you're ready to sort of go to prod with all of this? I can't remember if you mentioned that or not.
So I will say, you know, I've been at the medical center for, let's say I'm going on 6 years. However, I did have a gap year between year 5 and 6. I left and then came back. So I actually had deployed all this stuff before I left OSU. Now it so happened when I came back, you know, we changed servers and all the infrastructure was retired. So we needed to bring this back up. So I knew the process very well. So for me, it didn't take that long to install, configure, and deploy, just because I had done it previously and I still had all my notes on it. So there was a few little nuances on some of the servers that I needed to adjust to, but that was fine. So, you know, when I really started, I installed this on my desktop, and it's very easy. You can install R on your desktop and run RServe on your desktop and connect Tableau to RServe on your desktop to see how it works. So.
If you had any advice for someone that's getting started, is that, I mean, that sounds like it's your first step. Get it on your desktop, play around with it, and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. That was when I originally deployed it. That's how I did it. Is, you know, it was more a proof of concept. I wanted to see, you know, you read all the blogs and it makes it so glamorous, and oh, you just connect here and you plug and play and it's good to go. And then you come to find out, you're like, oh, I got to install this and I got to configure this. So for my instance, it was literally, I just wanted to see if I could get it to work, to see if it was something that we wanted to do. And knowing we had this business case for this percentiles, because it is very, you know, you need the data scored, aggregated first before you go and query the other data set. So it was a prime case for that. At the time, they didn't have Python, it was just R. So I waited maybe 6 months for Python to come out so we could do it in Python.
Cool. So we have Srujan is a server admin, it sounds like, or a site admin who's had a lot of experience with Python and the integrations on the server. And he has a couple comments to make. If you want to unmute, feel free.
Hi everyone. I don't have much experience on the Python or integration or integration, but recently, just like 10 days back, we did setup, and I should be thankful to Jeffrey because he's the one who guided me to set up R and Python connections on our Tableau Server environment. And yes, I'm Tableau Server admin. And to add a couple of points, when we get onto the Tableau Server to set up a connection, right, we'll be entering all the server name, host name, port number, and as everyone knows, user ID and password are optional. But we don't have an option to check whether we have connected to that particular or Python server correctly or not. We don't have any other way to cross-check from the Tableau server. So when I had raised ticket to Tableau, they confirmed that they don't have any function which has been put onto the Tableau server to check the connections. The only way where we can do is like firewall connection check. I mean, like doing a telnet to the R or Python server from our Tableau servers. That's one of the way to make sure we are able to connect to the R or Python servers. The other way is like writing up a simple script, like Jeff has shown, and publishing that into the Tableau server and running that. If it works, yes, we are good. Otherwise, we need to look into the logs. Those two are the most important thing, which I learned from my connection setup process. The another one, what I feel is that like most of the times what happens, right, when we trying to publish from local machine to server, we need to Tableau always recommend us to enter the host name or a host name as a server where R and Python has been installed. But in this case, what happens, right? If firewall team or do not accept to have a firewalls open between our local machine and to the R or Python server, then in that case, we need to say local host and port number and publish it. While after publishing, Tableau itself will prompt us a new screen saying that, could you let us know to which established connection you would like to use it? So at that moment, we need to select the connection which has been set up on the Tableau server. So those are the things which are thought to add on to the Jeffrey's demo.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks Jeffrey, and thanks to Shujan for those extra comments. We are running low on time. If you have any additional questions for Jeffrey, feel free to put them in the chat or put them on Slack in the general channel or in the Higher Ed Tag channel, and we can pass them to Jeff at some point in the future. So we are now going to switch over to Tableau Conference, which is happening in just a few weeks. So I just launched a poll. Want to know how many people have attended Tableau Conference in the past, and if you're attending this time around, is this going to be your first Tableau Conference? So Tableau Conference is virtual this year. It's completely virtual, completely free. If you attended last year's, it's very similar to last year's with a few cool new additions. So if you haven't already registered, go ahead and register. Even if you don't actually plan on attending, there's a raffle. If you are attending, make sure you block off your calendar, because it's really helpful to just make it known that, hey, you're going to be watching these videos and learning. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll in just a minute. People keep answering. This is kind of amazing. 70% almost of people have actually replied to the poll so far. That I'm just going to keep it open while I move on. So there's a bunch of fun stuff that's happening. The musical guest is back, or as I like to say, 2 turntablos and a microphone. It'd be great if I had a laugh track. One of the other cool things that I liked last year was they have a bunch of commercials between sessions, like legit commercials for fake products. My favorite was a candy bar because, you know, Halloween, with a slogan of "When your data says bite me." Note the spelling. There's also a photo booth. So if you want to show that, hey, I went to Tableau Conference, feel free to use the photo booth and app and share whatever photos you come up with. Most of the content is going to be in sessions, hour, 45-minute long sessions. They called them episodes last year. Not sure if they're going to use similar language this time around. Some of the sessions are how-to sessions. So how do you use this feature or that feature in Tableau? Some of them are going to be informative. So like more, here's how we did this thing. There's tips and trick sessions, including a speed tipping session. And some of the sessions are going to be around strategy, like how do you advocate for data literacy? There are multiple channels going. Pretend this is like TV back in the pre-Netflix TiVo days, where you actually would flip channels. But the cool thing is that they are all recorded, and they also play them multiple times throughout the day as they play them for different time zones. So there's like and the US one is the sort of the first run, and then APAC and Europe, I think, are on a time delay. There's also going to be additional on-demand sessions available on the Tableau conference site. This is the reason to register, even if you don't care about any of the live stuff. Those on-demand sessions are where you really learn and dig into what Tableau can do and what people are doing with Tableau. And those sessions will be available often with PowerPoints and or actual Tableau files to download and try out. I mentioned before, there are commercials. We also have some members of the higher ed Tableau community, including Ken, speaking in one of the sessions. There's a couple of sort of bonus things. So there's an education track that's going to be part of the main session. Put a little asterisk on this slide because in the past, when Tableau has done education-y things, it's not always stuff that we will find applicable at the higher ed level. But I have my fingers crossed that they've listened to our input and kind of given us some more targeted and useful sessions in that education track. There's also going to be a higher ed meetup. Information will be in Slack soon about signing up for that later today, in fact. And we'll also include it in the email with the recording to this session. Instead of putting a whole bunch of links that I forgot about in the chat right now. What else? So this is a really blurry but still useful screenshot of some of the sessions that are going to be available. And each day sort of starts off with what I would say sort of what is supposed to be the big pull, sort of like the 7 or 8 p.m. 7 Central, like thing that leads you into primetime TV watching. So on Tuesday, it's the keynote from the CEO and the chief product officers at Tableau. They often will have guest stars who will demo little bits and pieces of what they've been working on or what's coming up soon. One of the other things that I always watch for is the outfits, because there seems to be a Tableau uniform of sorts of blazers with t-shirts underneath. The one live Tableau conference I went to, it was all over the place, and that same thing I saw all throughout last year's conference. Wednesday's big event is the Iron Viz, which if you haven't heard of the Iron Viz, it's essentially like Iron Chef. It's a 20-minute competition to create the best viz possible. There are 3 finalists who have gone through multiple levels of competition. And now we're down to those last 3 finalists. Andy Cotgreave and Keisha Rose often wear the best Academy Award style swag. So like, glitter and tuxedos, but in that quirky, nerdy way that most Tableau people are probably used to. Thursday is Devs on Stage, and that's where actual developers, like the actual people who are in the code and writing Tableau code, share what they're working on, both stuff that's going to be released soon, as well as stuff that is still very much in the works. That group is known for their hoodies and t-shirts. I don't expect to see as many blazers there, but I do expect to see a whole lot of Tableau t-shirt designs. So a lot of that was just watching, but there are also ways that you can interact. And this is, in some ways, this is where you might get the most out of your Tableau experience, at least the experience next on the 9th, 10th, and 11th. First, there are brain dates, which are essentially like not quite speed dates, but like little dates where you meet other people who are interested in a topic, Tableau or data or whatever it is that has been set up. You can have one-on-one meetings, small group meetings. There are like, I think 5 or 6 people. And then you can also, new this year is this idea of a fishbowl where it's a much larger discussion. We're going to be setting up some brain dates. And if you, once the option opens up to set up brain dates, you guys should also start setting some up, and we can in the Slack space we can talk about what do we think might be useful to set up. If Anna is still here,
she is.
Yes, so Anna actually has been to a brain date, so tell us a little bit about your experience.
Well, I've been to brain dates last year and this year. Last year I went to one on the new relationships. And this year I went to one so far on getting executive buy-in for Tableau and for dashboards. And what I will say is they're very informative as long as you know what you want and you're willing to engage. It is very much a give and take. You know, you want to really interact, not just fly on the wall. And you want to know ahead of time what your questions are, because you can get great answers from great people.
Great. Thank you so much for that little testimonial. Earlier today, they actually had a session on what the brain dates are going to be like in the future. And the fishbowl idea is one where if you aren't sure what those questions are, if you want to be more sort of passive, you can be a fly on the wall because it's such a large group. So if you aren't, if you're a little nervous about that and just want to lurk, fishbowls might be another option where you can just lurk a little bit more and have other people do a lot more of the talking and discussing if you just, you don't want to. But thanks, Anna. The other things that are there are Tableau Doctor. So if you have a specific challenge that you want help solving, or want to talk about how your server is set up or whatnot, you can actually book time with a Tableau professional. There's also going to be a Slack channel. Tableau's doing their own Slack workspace. We're going to have a live stream so we can chat and gripe and also be like, yo, dude, did you see that? The link for that our Slack channel is in the chat now. A lot of this stuff that Tableau is putting out, they're hoping that early next week they'll have links available. So if you've registered, you'll get the email saying, hey, this and such is available. So we have no time, but we're going to come back to the slide if people do want to stick around and talk about how Tableau Conference was last year. We'll have some time afterwards. We'll just stick around for those that are interested. So we are sliding through a whole bunch of things. We are ready to wrap up. We've got like less than a minute. We want to know what you thought of today's meeting. I know it was jam-packed and I'm talking super fast to get through it. But we do have a survey. Link is in the chat. It'll also be in the email. Please go ahead and register for the November Higher Ed Tug meeting. The form is up and hopefully this time invites will work right. And there's also an option to subscribe to future updates so that when we send out notifications about things that are coming up, you're in there. So that's it for now. If you don't want to talk anymore, feel free to take off. Thank everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us for our session, for our October session. And I hope you have a howlingly good Halloween. If you want to stick around and talk about Tableau Conference, we'll just leave this room open for a little while and feel free to unmute and go from there. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so any of those conversations can be offline. Thanks, everyone.